Today's show, we're here with Ashleigh Wilson, the founder and CEO of AuditMate. Disclaimer, we invested in AuditMate through our VC fund. It was a heavily oversubscribed round and very excited to talk about the elevator industry. But before we do that, let's learn a bit more about Ashleigh. So Ashleigh, tell us your story. Tell us what the journey's been like.
Yeah, first, thanks for having me, Zain. I really appreciate it. So my story, I am a self-proclaimed elevator baby, is what I like to say. So I was raised in the industry. In my family, I have folks that worked for the Big Four as like business managers, mechanics, consultants. My first job was I was 12 years old cleaning the very gross, I might add, elevator office and shop. And then I myself joined the industry in my early 20s, actually during graduate school. And I was really active I was obsessed with the elevator industry. I thought that surely I would be the first female CEO of Schindler Elevators, where I worked at the time. I was being mentored by the US CEO. I was participating in global research projects. And I very quickly found that customers didn't understand their contracts at all. And that skyrocketing profits were a direct result of elevator companies just not really doing their jobs. So that's where AuditMate was born.
An elevator baby. So this is all you know, really, right? You don't know about anything outside of elevators. I'm kidding. I mean, you're pretty amazing person overall when it comes to, the insights you have. But is this something you're passionate about?
I'm passionate about people. When I left the industry kind of hands up in the air, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And I remember
just bored of elevators, or you were tired of the practices in the industry?
I was tired of the practices in the industry. And I had a friend tell me, you don't really care about elevators. And I was like, well, I do though. I mean, I'm a nerd in that sense, and I think that operations and engineering, and that's always been super interesting to me. But more than anything, I believe that humans have been an afterthought in the elevator industry. And that's what I'm most passionate about.
So you left the industry, did you decide just to do a company straight after and disrupt the industry? No, you're nodding your head.
No, I had no idea what I was doing.
Walk us through that journey. What did you think you were going to do? Did you try to work for a rival, or were you done and you were going to go into a completely different area?
Yeah, so I was down in South America presenting a global research project to all of the CEOs in North and South America, and for the company I was working for at the time. And I remember one of the CEOs looking at me because I was talking about empathy, and I was talking about who canceled contracts. I looked at a CEO and I said, do elevators cancel contracts, or do humans cancel contracts? Why aren't we talking about humans? And someone looked at me and said, empathy would be a great competitive advantage. And at that point, I was like, I'm done. And I was supposed to stay in the city and network with folks. And I jumped on a plane and I went to Rio, and I was like, I can't, and I locked myself in a hotel room, and I just started writing. And I remember calling my mom and just crying, and was like, I can't do this anymore. Even if I become the CEO of the US, then what? What's next? I still can't sleep at night. I'm tired of convincing people. I'm tired of convincing new people how to gaslight customers.
It also sounds to me, and we've talked about this, but it sounds to me like that realization that what would happen if elevator companies did have empathy? What would happen to their margins? What would happen to the way they operate?
Yeah, absolutely. What would happen if we told clients how often we would be coming, or how we maintain units, or what we're actually doing? And I don't know that clients really care about the nuts and bolts, but they care about transparency to the data. If I want to know, I want to have access. They don't all want to know, but the right should be there.
And if transparency did exist in the elevator industry, would profits keep soaring? Would margins be very high? Would these elevator companies do very well?
I mean, I think they would do well, right? I believe we're for profit, right? Like, I'm for profit. I'm not a nonprofit company. But, and I also don't think we should like cap people's profits. But when we're using lack of education and we're using intentionally vague contracts to maximize profits, that's not okay. Like, even customers believe in a fair profit margin. They're all for-profit companies, right? But it's when you're leveraging, I don't know, just like, it's icky. It's so icky to me.
So really the problem you're talking about is misleading customers, not
Absolutely.
fulfilling on the contracts. And these contracts you're talking about is really down to maintaining the elevators, because people pay for maintenance. Believe it or not, elevators break. And how do you prevent elevators from breaking? You send someone out. But to send someone out, well, the elevator company has to pay for that person to go out, and they have to maintain it. As a result of what you believe is very little maintenance, very little contract compliance, what's happening as a result of that? What happens to the customers and what happens to the elevator companies?
Yeah. So, I mean, from an elevator perspective, right, when we're not doing maintenance, it leads to breakdowns. Shocking, I know. When you don't maintain your car, what happens? Your car breaks down, right? Equipment and components deteriorate at expedited rates when we're not maintaining them. So the things about contracts in the US, or elevator contracts, is they cover major and minor repairs. So we're not maintaining the elevator, then what happens? It breaks down more. From a customer perspective, this leads to like tenant dissatisfaction, like flow of the building, right? Like there's many downsides on a customer side. And then so you have this broken elevator. Then what? Then it has to get repaired. So either it's covered under the maintenance contract or it's not covered under the maintenance contract. So an elevator company's goal is going to be to get you to try to pay. And the customer's goal is just to get the elevator fixed, right? They need people moving through the building. And especially when you think of something like retail. There's a major retailer here that their director of operations would say, having a down escalator costs me $10,000 an hour because people can't get up to that floor. So it affects profitability, it's tenant satisfaction, all of the things. So when an elevator company comes to the customer and says, this isn't covered under your contract, who knows the difference? Most clients, even the facilities managers, building engineers, people, they don't have the knowledge to know whether it's covered or not. So like, what's the difference between a door operator and a door restrictor? Most clients don't know that, and they don't know if it's covered or not. Or they say something like, this part would normally be covered, but it's now obsolete.
So if you're one of these large elevator companies, you're thriving on the fact that your customers don't have the technical expertise. And they can't have the technical expertise because if they start playing with the elevator, the contract's going to be void anyway. So people just trust the large elevator companies to fulfill their obligations on the maintenance side. What fascinated me with AuditMate and the industry is just one of those cases where the elevator companies continue to operate at high margins, and directly because of a lack of fulfilling those maintenance contracts, they keep growing and growing and growing. And it was shocking to me that this is a multi-$100 billion industry, or at least it's going to grow to that, right? I believe it generated $104 billion in revenue in 2018, and it's going to grow to $183 billion by 2027. So it's a fairly healthy growth rate. But it's not just that; it's how much of the revenue comes from producing elevators and how much of it comes from the maintenance side. Maybe you can tell us that because it's a fascinating stat.
Yeah, so over 30% is from the maintenance side, but of that revenue, but the maintenance is the cash cow of the entire industry. So even if the revenue isn't, it's only about a third or maybe a little more than a third, it's the highest profiting of any of the sectors. So on new installation or manufacturing, you have a smaller overhead, but the whole goal of new installation is to continue to capture the market on the maintenance side.
I mean, it sounds small to you, but it's tremendous when you're talking tens of billions of dollars in maintenance. And the fact that it generates most of the or the highest portion of profit margins come from selling maintenance contracts. You know, you're not necessarily in the business of producing hardware, in the business of selling the maintenance contract, and the hardware is a way for you to get that lucrative maintenance contract.
Absolutely. And then you manipulate the manufacturing in order to make more revenue in the maintenance. So what I mean by that, I just mentioned obsolete earlier. So because the big four often are also the manufacturers, they can say, okay, we're not quite at budget. How do we make budget this year? Well, let's make this part obsolete, and then we can go to all our customers with that type of elevator, and now they have to buy the new version, part.2.0, and now that's not covered under the maintenance contract any longer.